So, Ex Machina, to me, Greg, is a study of not just artificial intelligence itself, it's specifically a study of the relations and relationships between humans and their machines, between humans and themselves, and between humans and other humans. This movie is a mosaic of interactions and analyses, which ultimately tells us almost everything about humans, good and bad. Right? So it's not just the study of the actual machinery and how the bells and whistles are clicking and spinning. It is a study of humanity more than anything else. But it tells us about us, but by way of machine, by way of technology that we create. So that's what I really think that this movie is getting to. What do you think of that? And then what do you think this movie is on your end?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that take. I think Garland is clearly trying to examine the intersection of technology and humanity, and I think he does that in a lot of his work. Even going all the way back to 28 Days Later, which he wrote and Danny Boyle directed, is, that's the result of people trying to make technological advances in medicine.
Sure.
I think it's something he's always been fascinated with, and the intersection of people with each other. I completely agree with. I mean, this is one of those great, like, kind of, almost theatrical kind of films where you're kind of in one location all the time and you're just letting these characters kind of bounce off of each other, which I always really enjoy watching.
Yeah.
I think it's also an examination of the ego. I think, you're seeing two sides of an ego in Caleb and Nathan. And what I find interesting about it is that you're almost watching like who Nathan was through Caleb at one time, the type of person that he probably used to be. And I just think that that's really interesting, that this idea of like Nathan is almost kind of invited his past self into his home so that he can impress him. And that I think is just this crazy idea of like how, lonely genius is. And I think it's part of that too, that being brilliant can be very lonely, especially when you're as arrogant as he is. And then I think it also goes into the idea of determinism, free will, what belongs to you, what doesn't, what kind of agency you have and what you don't. Just because you're a machine, does that mean your desires, wants, needs are any less important than a human being's? What is a human being? Man, there's just so much to take from this. And I think you can read it as a cautionary tale, but something I think about Garland is that there's a respect for technology that he has. Like, it's something that fascinates him. And I know when he was a kid, or not a kid, but like younger, he did a bit of coding and, he kind of learned some of this stuff. And I think that's why he's so interested in it. But I think he just has this fascination with the intersection of people and machines, and
maybe there's a bit of him in Caleb.
Absolutely. And in Nathan, and probably in Ava.
Yeah.
This film feels very personal. It's his first that he's directed, so that he's written a bunch of movies. And so I think when you're a writer and then you decide to make that leap into directing, I think that first project you choose to do that for is usually something pretty personal. Right. It means something special to you. In some aspects, just speaking as an artist, it's like your firstborn child. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to love all your children, but that first one was a big deal. I think this movie meant a lot to him, and you can see it. I mean, it's just made with such care and gentleness and empathy. And I think that's a big part of this film too, is empathy. And what should that extend to? Who deserves it? Like, who deserves your empathy? Does everything, I think the idea of consent, before I get too into the weeds, because I'm about to just launch onto a whole tangent, because there's so much in this movie.
Right.
But my take is that I think it is allegorical. I think it is a bit of a cautionary tale. I do also think that I don't think he views anyone in this as bad necessarily. I think there are just actions and consequences, but yeah, I don't know. It's very interesting.
Yeah, I also thought of kind of an alternative take, as this is really what it all amounts to and boils down to is a sort of warning by way of just the idea of consequentialism. This idea that the results are what matter, right? That this idea that the ends are sort of defining the means. And I think he does a great job of being quite neutral on that actual question. But it's a great experiment to take into the laboratory of filmmaking and running it so that we can all see all these things play
Hmm.
out and say, hey, this is a scenario. It's very likely. It's very, relevant to the time, or it will be. I can see it. I can smell it. Right? It's in the air. And just to say, is it really worth the consequence of what we are doing here? Is that actually a project that we should engage in that's worth our time?
Hmm.
What is the cost of that going to be? And are we willing to eat that cost? Are you willing to
Sure.
give your life for it? In the
Yeah.
case of Nathan. So we're going to get to that.